let's start off with my Metropolitans because David Robertson, the closer, was dealt. And I heard, like, Gary Cohen calls the games for the Mets. He's a legendary voice for the Metropolitans. He said it was basically like it was like selling 5 days before you had to sell. Like, you basically, you tipped your hand. You play poker. I don't. But you showed your cards before anybody said you had a call. Mm-hmm. Well, like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now that's pissed off Mad Max. So Max demands an owner with the meeting with the owner, Steve Cohen. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. And now he's on the short list of guys that might get dealt before the first. Because Max is saying, dude, you shouldn't have started the Titanic and started sell, and get rid of the pieces before this thing sinks. And I wonder now, does that signal guys like Max Scherzer, who, by the way, minus 250 to stay in New York, but, you know, he might go to management and say, all right, fine, I'll waive my no trade clause.
Let's do it.
And let's go ahead and let's.
I think him and Verlander both are two guys we're going to talk about here, but I think both of those guys are very realistic to be on the move, and especially if either one of them is really and truly upset about the situation that's going on there and what's happened. I think, and if you're a team going after a rental, right? Like, if you're going after a guy knowing that maybe his best days are behind him, and certainly you don't expect a ton out of him going forward, but like, you need 6 good starts in the playoff. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need 6 starts out of this guy.
If I knew I was a playoff team and you told me one of my anchors in the postseason is going to be Scherzer or Verlander, sign me up today for that.
And there are some teams too, right, that we've already talked about as far as that are kind of right there on the brink that certainly could use a true number one. I mean, listen, the Orioles don't have one. Like, as we sit right now, they have some guys that have been pitching well, but they don't have a surefire true number one by any stretch of the imagination. Now, Kevin Gausman did pitch good yesterday and kind of looks like he's back on track for the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays would have been a team certainly that would have loved to kind of get, I think, a true number one. Though, like I said, Gausman's velocity's down. It's weird, like, what's going on with him. Like, his velocity's down like 3 miles an hour, but he did have a good start yesterday, so maybe he figured something out somewhere along the way with that. But there are some teams that I think they're going to be fielding calls. I'll put it that way. And if you were going to bet this, I mean, like, you look, the Rangers, another team that
they could use one more.
Certainly could use that guy that propels them over the edge.
Well, and I think you're right. I think we're looking at past the teams. And again, normally the favorites, like the Mets here for Scherzer, to retain him minus 250. He does have the no trade clause. He could say,
which is why that number's where it's at, right? Because if there was no trade clause, this would be. They would not even be the favorite. Yeah. They wouldn't even be the favorite.
So that's why he can say no. But he does feel like he is, at least in the surface, disgruntled because of Robertson deal. So maybe he would waive it to go. I wonder if he'd go to a younger team like the Orioles or the Reds and say, you guys, hey, kids, you need an adult starter? Okay, I'm your guy. I mean, it would make some sense there. The Dodgers would be interesting because Max has already been there, right? So he's already done the Clayton Kershaw thing, and Max is there. So 9-1. I think the Dodgers, they're in trade talks apparently for Nolan Arenado. They do need one more starter, I would believe, too, once you get to the postseason.
The only reason I think that the Rangers are the most intriguing here, because if you're Scherzer, again, you're only doing this to ring chase, right? So the path of least resistance is probably coming through the AL as opposed to coming through the NL, where the Braves and the Dodgers and all these teams are. So, like, I wonder if you just look at that situation and you go and say, like, hey, listen, I will listen to offers, but it needs to be offers from the American League, because I'm not going to sit here and go through, again, the Braves that look like killers. You've got this team in the Dodgers that we know is going to pick up and spend a ton of money somewhere along the way. I'm pretty sure the way the Phillies have been playing and things that are going on, so again, I would go to the AL if I was them. I would go to the AL.
Let's look at the other potential Hessian on the Mets starting pitching staff, and that's Justin Verlander. I say Hessian because hired help, right? So he could be hired help here where he would go. Now, again, not as long as we saw Scherzer at $250, $1.75 to keep him in New York. Both these guys have discussed they're a little bit disappointed that it looks like the Mets are selling because they thought they want to make a run after August 1st. So that's why these numbers play a role where they are. They're the Rangers again as the second betting favorite, or the first betting favorite after staying with his current team at plus 250. The Astros are interesting to go back there where he's won a World Series before at 6-1. I don't look at the Astros and go, Well, who doesn't need a Justin Verlander? I mean, he's pitching
Right.
great again now. He's had some iffy starts, but for the most part, he's been really good since starting off the year on the IL. So you look at July, he's been really good. Now you look at the teams that I do think really could use that help that we talked about. There are the Dodgers at 16-1, Orioles at 12-1. The team that I'm really stunned by, if you saw Scherzer's number for this team and now Verlander's number, it's the Rays. 30-1 to get Scherzer, 45-1 to get Verlander. What are they doing? Are they just playing the small market thing and we're not going to trade for a contract? Like, you need help, Tampa. You're not going to win as currently constructed, I don't think, if they don't make a big move.
I'm wondering if this comes, if baked into this too, is just what could the team offer in return? And that might make where these odds sit as well, right? I mean, what can they honestly offer back to the Mets to make this thing happen, you know? And like, as you mentioned, Verlander, a guy that could go in and certainly help any of those teams at the top, like day one. I mean, it would, I would say the same thing about him that I said about Scherzer, right? Like, I would prefer to go to the AL if I was him. You look at a team like the Orioles, how would you not love what you see with this Orioles team, knowing that, man, this is a team that's going to be good for, it's not like a Braves type situation because they don't have all these guys locked up for the next decade like the Braves do, but like they've got them for a while and they've got all these young guys up and they've still got a couple of really big name prospects that are coming up as well. I think that would be a fun team to go play for. And even if you don't make the full run this year, maybe you look at next year and say like, wow, these kids are going to have a year of experience under their belt. And you go and like you mentioned Verlander, he has not given up more than 3 earned runs in his last 6 starts there for this Mets team. So again, kind of giving you what Verlander kind of gives you.
And you knew once he got healthy at beginning of the year and really set the Mets back as a team remember Max had a suspension for sticky stuff and Verlander's on the IL. I think that's part of the reason. And then of course the Edwin Diaz thing, why everything's come off the tracks that we're talking about these Mets at the trade deadline, but that's where they are. You know, I look at the Sox, it's Stephanie's Sox, 9 games over. This is not a mirage at this point. They're legit.
And we can say when we're wrong.
Oh, I was dead wrong. I thought they would fade.
Listen, we're not going to sit here and say they were right about everything. We were dead wrong about this Sox team. I thought they were overperforming at the beginning of the year, and eventually that the wheels would come off. That has just not happened.
Could you, I know it feels like it's longer down the board, but the Sox getting a Verlander, a Scherzer, a frontline starter with some of the younger, like when we're talking about Shohei, they did it with Mookie Betts. They realized this isn't going to work, so they dealt him. Like, sometimes you got to do that. And that was remember how harsh the fan base, and look at the young Sox now. I'm not saying all of that's the fruits of the Mookie Betts trade, but that's why we get back to the Scherzer, to the Shohei deal, and you don't get some of those prospects that might be able to help you out in a couple of years. And now I look at the Sox, because they made proactive moves like that back in the Mookie Betts days, they could be in the running for a Scherzer or a Verlander, a frontline starter here before the August 1st deadline, and go, yeah, we're much closer than we thought, much faster than we thought. If we did make that push and we got I go back to CC Sabathia when he got dealt to Milwaukee years ago, when he was in his prime, and he shoved for Milwaukee. And like, that worked short term. So it could be a rental. And that's why I always thought Shohei could actually have been an outside shot for the Sox if they were going to actually move him. Because I do think the Sox are one big frontline starter away from really being taken seriously the rest of the way.
It would be interesting. It's going to be interesting to me to see if the Orioles or Reds make any moves or how they go about making the moves, because those teams are in really, really good spots right now, and they really do need that true number one. And, maybe it's just going after one of these more secondary type pitchers as opposed to these super high big name guys. Maybe it's an Eduardo Rodriguez type situation, one of those things.
He goes back.
But, so like maybe it could be one of those deals.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.